Hello, this is David Hall, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar, which is 5G Connectivity for IoT, presented by the IoT M2M Council and sponsored by BICS, Digi, and Vodafone Business. Before we begin, we wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. Today's presentation will be approximately 45 minutes long, followed by a 15-minute Q&A session with our presenters. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets that you can use. All of these widgets are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. You can expand your slide area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. The webcast is being streamed through your computer, so there is no dial-in number. For the best audio quality, please make sure your computer speakers or your headset are turned on and the volume is up so that you can hear the presenters. If your slides are delayed, pushing F5 on your keyboard will refresh the page. You can find additional answers to some common technical issues located in the Help widget at the bottom of your screen. An on-demand version of the webcast, including the slides, will be available approximately 24 hours after the webcast is over, and this can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A widget. We will have a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of the webinar, but please feel free to ask questions at any time during the presentation. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed or if we run out of time, it may be answered later via email. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Keith Kreischer, Executive Director of the IMC. Keith, you can take it away.
Thanks so much, David. Good morning, everyone. Hello, and I bid you welcome to this webinar, 5G Connectivity for IoT, organized by the IoT M2M Council. My name is Keith Kreischer. I'm the Executive Director of the IMC, and I'll be introducing our speakers in a moment. They're coming to us from well-known solutions providers BICS, Digi, and Vodafone. But first, a few words about the IMC for those on the webinar that might not be familiar with us. The IMC is a trade association that was formed in 2014 by a pretty eclectic group of IoT solutions providers. They included big telcos, hardware and software providers, smaller MVNOs, satellite services companies. And the consensus among that group was that we did not want to be a technical standards body or a testbed group. There are plenty of good people working on those issues, and indeed those issues are important. But we felt that those organizations were essentially groups of vendors talking amongst themselves, and we wanted to find out more about people that buy IoT stuff. And by that I mean enterprise users, OEMs, and apps developers that are deploying embedded solutions in the field. We wanted to know more about these people. What did they need, and how we could help them. So we started putting out content. Pretty much anything we could get our hands on, frankly. White papers, use cases, newsletters, blogs. And we organized that content into vertical market channels. We didn't ask people that wanted access to the content to pay us anything, but we did ask them to qualify as buyers, not sellers. We asked them to join the IMC as rank and file members, to give us permission to talk to them, and crucially, we asked for fairly extensive tabulatable demographic information. And that whole effort has been a lot more successful than we ever would have imagined. The IMC today has 25,000 members. We get roughly 200 new members weekly. We do prune member roles to keep it at roughly 25,000. About 40% of our members come from North America, 30% from Europe. We cover 24 different vertical markets of application, everything from asset tracking to retail point of sale to automotive manufacturing to precision agriculture. The IMC sees its mission as an industry accelerator, bringing IoT technology adopters together with solutions providers to speed IoT deployment cycles and reduce CapEx, OpEx investment risks. Even at scale. And we see today's webinar on 5G in IoT as perfectly in keeping with that mission. And with that, I'd like to introduce our speakers. I'll start with Raphael Gott, who is Head of Signaling and Roaming Platforms at BICS. Rafael has 20 years of experience in the telecom industry in sales, business development, project and product management. He's currently worldwide responsible for managing P&L and commercial strategy and a portfolio of the signaling and roaming business unit. He's now heading all signaling, 5G, big data, and roaming initiatives within BICS. Previous to BICS, he has experience with Alcatel, Proximus, Vanguard Telecom, and Roamware. Rafael, good morning, and thanks so much for being here.
Good morning, Keith. Thanks a lot. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Next up, we will have this morning Scott Nelson. Scott is VP of Product at Digi International. Scott joined Digi in 2017 as VP of Product, and he's responsible for directing the company's vision, strategy, and product roadmaps in collaboration with R&D and sales and operations. Previous to Digi, Scott has been with the Skywater Technology Foundry, Rollouts Technology, hope I'm pronouncing that right, Scott, and previous to that, Logic PD. Scott, good morning.
Thank you, Keith, and it's great to be here.
Thank you. And the final speaker we'll hear from before our Q&A today is Ludo Fossati. He's head of Vodafone IoT Americas. Ludo joined Vodafone in 2014 and is now leading the IoT business in the Americas based out of New York City. He has led Vodafone's IoT vertical market development with responsibility for driving new business, technologies such as NB-IoT and satellite, and developing vertical industries such as smart meters, home automation, industrial equipment, and mHealth. Prior to Vodafone, Ludo was with Cobra Telematics, and prior to that, he started his career in the private equity industry in Italy and the UK in various investment sectors. Good morning, Ludo.
Thank you, Keith. Good morning, everybody. Very happy to be here.
Once again, a more in-depth look at these profiles of our speakers is available online. We encourage you to look those up. And we will be addressing all questions after the three presentations. That comes at the end of our session. And as David pointed out, any questions that we don't get to, we will be addressing offline after the event. And with that, I would pass things off to Rafael Glatt, who is going to give us a nice preview, sort of a general presentation on connectivity, 5G connectivity in the IoT sector today. Rafael, take us away.
Thanks a lot, Keith. So is everyone seeing the slides on screen for the moment? Because honestly, yeah. Okay, so hello everyone. So the idea of today's presentation is more to give you an overview of the current 5G implementations, connectivity, and situation worldwide, where the IoT is coming in and where the operators are focusing today. But before to do that, a quick introduction of BICS, where we are being an high-tech carrier for over 20 years, connecting almost every operator, MVNOs, and service providers in the world. If you look at our extensive network, we carry about 50% of the data roaming traffic worldwide over our network, which allows us to have a good view on what is happening and lead our MVNE initiatives. Now, to start, what is about 5G? 5G, for me personally, is more like the technological answer to human impatience. Today is a way to get everything connected, everything faster, real time, bigger, and at the end it's what they expect, connecting millions, trillions of devices, having a low latency, having low energy consumption, and being able to have extremely high bandwidth. In what order depends on the use case. But 5G is all about enabling all this today. Is this something happening today? Not yet in the full scope of what the GSMA expects and what the people are expecting, but some of the IoT cases make sense, but make more sense once operators will move to the full 5G core network, which I will detail a bit later. So if you look overview today, the expectation, of course, is that 5G subscription will be one of the fastest growing subscription worldwide, even a faster adoption expected than LTE. A lot of challenges and frequency is also the frequencies. So we have a bit the same childhood diseases as you have in 4G when the handset has to support the different frequencies, and you need in the beginning, especially for roaming activities, to have compatibility on the frequencies. Today, the main focus is the 3.5 gig bandwidth, but we see also many operators working in the 26, 28, or even some allowance in 70 gigahertz. Of course, the higher you go, the more antennas, the more base stations you need, and which makes it also a very expensive network to deploy on a nationwide scale. Why today you see that many operators focus mainly on the big cities and allowing that to have. And of course, then you need the 4G compatibility to have it with it. So if you look today, might be a bit, because this is the data of last week, officially 22 operators have launched 5G worldwide. A lot of others are doing trialing, but those 23 have officially launched. Several in the Middle East, Europe, as you have the Vodafone announcement, in the US, all the big operators, and of course the front runners in Korea. But all of them have officially launched, and some of them, through the intermediary of IPX providers such as BICS, have already enabled 5G roaming on the non-standalone version. Now, just to come back to 5G, 5G has a lot of new development. It's a new radio network. It's a new core network if we go to the full 5G, and new technologies where the full expand of SDN and FFV can be used. In total, it has been defined as 3 different types, but all use cases fall in a mix of those types. The one where the biggest one and where most of the operators are focusing today is what you call the enhanced mobile broadband on the lower left, which is basically offering very high bandwidth downloads and very high speeds towards the subscribers. So what we see is that operators are moving more to giving better roaming data access in the way, but not changing the behavior of the subscriber, just giving them a much higher speed. Some operators, we speak about 15 to 20%, are also focusing on the MMTC, the massive machine type communications. That's where the IoT comes in, how to manage this. Those use cases make sense in 4G. In 5G, they make more and more sense. But of course, when you speak about 5G, you also speak about the ultra-reliable, low latency, which means that you want real-time communication. Every use case that we're speaking today, however it's about health, gaming, and so on, falls somewhere in that triangle. It's a mix of elements, but in the reality today, operators mainly focus on the enhanced mobile broadband. That's the first step to operators. We expect all the other use cases to come in the coming years. Now, of course, 5G is a drastic change in the network. There are several implementations model. That's the only technical slide, but I'm not going to explain the technical part. The important part is that you have 2 versions, what they call the non-standalone, which is the most adopted one, which means that the 5G radio is open, so you use the 5G radio, but you still use the 4G core to exchange that traffic, the IPX and the diameter, and you add some parameters. While there will be a transition to go to the standalone version with all the new protocols, HTTP v2 and so on, where you use a full 5G core network where the full scale of NFV and SDN can take their power to be able to manage this in a better way. In 5G also, we have only compatibility with 4G, but there's no backwards to 3G. So what we see also today, some operators are starting to decommission their 3G network to focus only on 4G and 5G. And for the voice part, focusing on having voice over LTE, especially on the roaming part, and keeping maybe a little bit of 2G and 3G for SMS and some other practical implementations. So the main challenges, because for us as BICS, we're looking a lot at the roaming part and the interworking challenges, is that for operators, you need, when you go to 5G, is that you have to include all the new interfaces, which is an expense. That's why operators are first focusing on non-standalone. There are a lot of use cases, as we know, and some of them will explain by my colleagues in the next presentations. And also there are a lot of models supported, and they all have to interact. So it's not an easy challenge, but everyone is moving to it. But operators are pragmatic and looking at the best way to evolve in the most cost-effective way also, because at the end it has to make sense, and you have to be able to monetize what you're representing. So if you look at the 5G service in general, and you look at the IPX that is supporting, basically operators and carriers have to evolve their connectivity for IPX, going to 5G IPX, supporting the whole transport. All their connected platforms, STPs and so on, and proxies have to evolve to support 5G as well. So the 5G, supporting the 5G, what we call 5G signaling, basically. Of course, all the hubs, the roaming hubs, everything where you transport the traffic has to be able to support all those 5G traffic, but also the voice for 5G, and also what we see, the new RCS hubs and so on, have to be able to be supported on the 5G. Then, of course, you will have to add everything to manage your subscriber, manage your IoT devices. You have to be able, for example, steering has to evolve. You have to be able to send them to the right network while roaming. The security, extremely important, especially in 5G. There are some specific calls going there with the set functionality and for encryption. And then, of course, all this will only work if also you evolve all your tools, business intelligence tools, tracking and tracing tools to support the whole scale of your services and products you offer to your subscribers. So at the end, what does it mean? It means that if you go for 5G, you enable it locally. Most of the operators do, like we said, non-standalone, evolving their radio network, but not yet the full core network. But even for roaming, they will enable that between operators. But you will need, and for this is very important for the IoT part, is that if you want to do IoT in a roaming environment, you need to be able to have global coverage, global multi-network in every country. What does it mean? It means that if I have an IoT use case, let's say following containers and so on, or even let's go to a more pragmatic approach where you have security services like police, army, and so on. They cannot just rely on one network in one country. They need to rely on different networks and have connectivity in a seamless way to every network. The way to do that is basically by managing this in different ways. You can have global SIMs, you have local SIMs. There are a lot of potential elements that are linked to how the IoT devices will connect to the 5G network. So basically, this concludes a little bit my introduction, my part of introducing where 5G is going. IoT is not the main focus today in the real market, but we expect it to take in more and more space as of next year with the new use cases, and especially when the 5G networks evolve to the standalone. There are all the big use cases of IoT that are expected will take the full power of 5G. So I'm open to any questions at the end of the presentation. Back to you, Keith. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Raphael. That was a very nice, concise overview of what's going on in the sector with 5G. I will now hand off to Scott Nelson of Digi, who will give us some hardware perspective and some hands-on perspective. Scott, take us away.
Okay. Thanks, Keith. So I'm going to talk about kind of taking that foundation, and we use the pun here, the fog, because we think that a very important part of looking at 5G right now from a system integrator and a hardware and software integration perspective is and essentially understanding everything that's being told to us, and then understanding kind of what we're going to do to take advantage of it. So, there has been a lot, there's always a lot of hype in any new technology. So how do we kind of move from understanding that hype into the opportunity? These are a few of the articles that I actually encourage people to read. Some of them have pretty, dramatic statements. Ignore 5G for now. IoT is meaningless without 5G is a very recent kind of publication. All of these have, I think, kind of key points that are good to read in understanding different perspectives on how it's going to deploy. As we just heard from Raphael, this is an expensive and hard to deploy network. It is going to take time, but it has immediate opportunity as well as long-range opportunity, and kind of understanding some of this is what we're going to try to help with. we have this, our 5G expert, Harald Remmert, who's actually here with me today. We have a cowboy hat for him. You know, herding generations of cats is what we presently call our efforts here in 5G. And, you know, the first part here is we've got the generational projection. I'm not going to go through this in detail today, but, you know, today at Digi, we are helping people migrate off of 2G, 3G, you know, because they still have deployments, massive deployments in some cases on 2G. We're deploying in 4G on a daily basis, thousands and thousands of devices. And we have customers today that are telling us that we have to have certain implementations, certain CAPs, because they are, you know, looking at it as a 5G implementation ahead of the physical deployment. And so we are presently moving back and forth all the way from 2G to 5G in our developments and our deployments. And you can see here some of the timelines. Again, Rafael did a great job going through that. I won't go through that. But there's also the usual performance characteristics. This is this is the CATs we call. These are the 4G LTE CATs, which are well positioned today for many of the things, most of the things that we already do in IoT. And Digi is a very IoT-centric company. And we have the high CATs, which are the high-speed, connected site and people CATs, 11 through 20. We have a lot of, Cat 18 things going on right now. And then we've got the low CATs. We call, the IoT CATs, really M and NB-IoT. We're seeing a lot of activity in actually 1.4 and M already today because there are a lot of things that people can do prior to some of the performance improvements that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. And this is, one of the things I wanted to point out is that this Cat 11 to really Cat 18 and Cat 20, and customers are viewing this as previewing 5G. And so the applications where they're deploying this tend to be applications that are often discussed as being kind of key applications for 5G, or at least in the environments. So let's talk about those early opportunities. And this obviously is a self-driving vehicle, which is one of the ones that's most frequently discussed. And I like self-driving vehicles as a discussion point for 5G because it touches on kind of three things. It's a real-time control, safety critical application. It's an infrastructure application because you've got vehicles in infrastructure, and it's an AI application because these vehicles are going to have the ability to do cognitive actions and make decisions, life and death decisions eventually. We get much to ponder today in 5G. We've got I grabbed a couple of blurbs. We've got Verizon, showing phones. We had the Super Bowl here last year, and they deployed, at the Super Bowl, we had 5G capability. We've got AT&T, of course, with 5GE, which is sometimes viewed with some skepticism about 5G, but I think it's a really good example of getting people to think about the problem, independent of the actual G that you're in, but think about how to take advantage of the capabilities, that you're going to have. The rollouts, Rafael had some stuff on this as well. I think the main point that we want to make here, and this is a summary of the rollouts across the carriers in the U.S., they're really focused on urban deployment. And this is a key part of thinking about whether or not you're going to be an early adopter of 5G, is kind of where will this complex and expensive infrastructure first show up, and what kinds of applications can we address with it in those deployments. We saw another version of this slide. It is a one network for all design. High speed, many devices, real time. This is a good summary of how one thinks about control systems and the many applications of IoT. All three of these things are always, in the spread. And what's interesting about 5G, I think we tell customers 5G is really the first generation that has promised, if you're on a low CAT system, you don't really have to worry about transitioning off when the next generation comes out because they're maintaining both the low CATs and the high CATs at the same time. 2G, 3G, 4G, you had to kind of start worrying about what's the lifetime of my network. 5G has some characteristics of longevity that give industrial IoT customers solace. Early deployments, we're really focused on speed and volume of data, and you can see this from the 5GPP reference down below. Things that are always, highly reliable, connected, no perceived delay. You have AR and VR type applications, which are similar to the self-driving vehicles. Automation and control at both the vehicle level and the factory level. Tactile, more interactive things, and then when you get into the extended timelines and you start to look at deployments in broader areas, then you can get to the massive amounts of things, both in cities and in maybe rural applications, agriculture, and things where you might have massive amounts of data that you need to get from a wide range of sensors. And of course, security is going to be an issue on everything. And one of the things we'll talk about in a minute is 5G is going to bring a capability of proximal security that we don't always have with the existing technology. One thing we talk about at Digi is a very edge-centric company. We deploy at the physical edge with our XBs. We deploy at what we call the aggregation edge, which is typically the gateways and routers. Everything is connected to the cloud, of course. And everything that we build today has partitioned compute capabilities in it so that we can do everything from simple protocol translations to business logic, at the appropriate level. One of the things we see is when 5G deploys, there's going to be this multi-axis edge computing layer that's going to deploy. And it's going to be a pretty massive layer of compute capabilities because of the speed and the density of the network. And it'll have massive edge compute, it'll have lower latency, it'll have lower data transfer costs because of the proximity, security via proximity, and really is going to enable mission critical applications to move into, I think this is a kind of a classically defined as a fog layer, but it'll have cloud compute capabilities, particularly if you think about it from the point of view of cloud a few years ago in terms of scale. And we think this recent announcement with AT&T and Microsoft, I think, is really a great forecasting of what's going to happen with this layer. You've got a partnership here, and the people that are going to deploy this layer, partnering with a company that manages the cloud and knows how to manage the cloud and help us manage our applications in the cloud. And so we were excited to see this announcement, to think about taking advantage of this capability. So who should be, who will be, or who should be, if you're watching, the early movers. Population centers are really going to be helping the early movers. The enterprise, faster speeds, cutting the cord, fixed wireless, SD-WAN, public safety. We're seeing a lot of Cat 18 work in public safety, traffic and transit, improved coverage, resilience, latency. The first responders, of course, will be a key part of this. With FirstNet, infrastructure will be very important. Smart cities, of course, you'll have an infrastructure in the cities. You got lower latency, you got massive numbers of devices. You'll be able to think about autonomous vehicles, traffic systems, parking systems, water management systems, garbage management systems, all of the things that are typically part of a smart city, a smart city deployment. So I think early movers here, you're going to look at applications that are traditionally part of that city infrastructure. Industry 4.0 will follow, and we put the word in time in here. It's really all about time. It's about latency, it's about streaming time, it's about uptime. So you're going to have mission-critical applications over cellular networks. Edge-based machine learning and AI will be more easily deployed with 5G. And it's all about when you're in mission-critical or automation systems, it's uptime, uptime, uptime. And we recently at our IoT global conference here at Digi, we had a pivoting irrigation company tell us, yeah, uptime is great, but what we really need is reliability. This 5 nines uptime is great, but 5 nines reliability is also great. And when we kind of asked him, so what do you mean? And he said, well, we don't run all the time, but when it's time to run, it better run, right? And that's the reliability part of the network with the massive and dense deployment that we're seeing will help. But we want to remind everybody, there's still a long way to go. This is from This is from, I think, Dr. Pesa is her name, from Ericsson. They're a really neat chart showing about the kind of the combination of latency and reliability in the applications. And, when you look at 4G, there's still a lot to do, right? There's remote control, monitoring, there is process automation, and there's a whole host of digital services in the industrial space. So, what we're saying, the early movers will drive adoption of machine learning, AI, and IoT with the edge capabilities of 5G. But you can start now, because the key thing, and this is an article from Dr. Timothy Cho, who wrote Precision, recently spoke at our conference here at Digi as well. It's about digital services, and there's a transformation that has to happen. And so while 5G is showing a lot of new opportunity, we encourage customers, don't wait for 5G, because it's going to take a while to deploy. You need to start your business transformation today, and there's a lot that you can do with the technology that we have, in our hands today. And so a lot of excitement and enthusiasm for both, where we're going and where we are today in terms of the IoT. So there's my thank you. I wanted to recognize Harold. Harold's our 5G expert. He gives me all the insight, and I get to do the presentation. So hand it back to you, Keith.
Very good, very good. Thanks to both of you, and a very, very nice sort of hands-on feel for where we're at and where we're going. So thanks so much. Next up is Ludo Fasati of IoT Americas at Vodafone, and Ludo's going to give us an emphasis on use cases and challenges that are out there. Ludo, please take us away.
Yeah, thank you very much. So first of all, let me say more of a romantic comment here. I want to thank everybody on the webinar who's working around 5G, whether you are working in the telecom industry, so in Vodafone, or a competitor of ours, or a consultant, or a hardware manufacturer, an antenna manufacturer, a system integrator, a small startup, or even a big, large corporation. A big thank you. You should be very proud of taking this challenge forward. It's a big one, as Raphael and Scott mentioned. It's a tough one, but I think it is one of the pillars of the evolution of our society and our planet. So I think we should be very proud of doing this. Having said that, let's go more into more realistic stuff and more close to earth. I am Ludo Fasati. I head the IoT business for Vodafone here in the U.S. and based out of New York. And we handle all of the American customers' IoT business around the globe, and also we support European, Asian, African customers who are willing to deploy IoT solutions in the U.S. We heard a lot about 5G, about the speed, the latency, the efficiency and reliability of the network, and the density of the number of devices you can connect. What I think I'd like to add to Raphael and Scott's presentation is that if you cross these skills of the network and you put it together, you create a smarter network. A network that is smart, a network that can be used for more than only just moving data from point A to point B, but it's a network that can actually help you to control your assets and control your devices. I have an example later around drones, and I'll get to that later. But I think the role of telecom operator and the role of the network infrastructure itself will change with 5G. Thanks to the speed, the latency, and all of the features that my colleague just mentioned, the network becomes a tool to control your assets across the globe. Now, how does 5G play with Vodafone? I'm glad to see that Vodafone is mentioned as one of the operator that is deploying more 5G, more 5G, more countries. We are the most global telecom operator in the world. That gave us the leadership in IoT. So we are today considered to be the market leader in IoT with roughly 90 million connections and growing fast. I think the globality and the ubiquity challenge that was presented by Monsieur Raphael. I think it's a good one. It's something that, of course, we have at heart, and we're working on it. As you can see from this slide, we started from our key countries and the key cities in those countries, but we are working on expanding that the more we can into also the rural area and also 5G to everybody out there who needs it. This map is of like a month ago. We have other announcements that came out public around the Netherlands also and Romania that are also moving into 5G, starting testing and opening up labs and 5G centers for people to try the 5G experience. So this is us. We are 1,400 people working in IoT globally. We have team in all of the continents and region, and we leverage a lot on our global Vodafone consumer and fixed business, and our colleagues all across it serving more, fixed TV, fixed, and mobile phones. So moving on, key use cases for 5G. I'd like to mention 6, even if it's 5, because the other ones are that it's more of a question mark. And basically, I pick those ones because are the ones that actually are really a specific feature of the 5G network. The first one being autonomous vehicles. There's a huge amount of data that needs to be sent. We currently connect more than 20 million cars. We roughly connect 60 to 70% of European and Asian car manufactured cars coming out of the factory are connected by us. So we have this luck of having the honor of being trusted by many car manufacturers. But autonomous vehicle needs 5G because of the massive amount of data that a autonomous car we need to send, and the sensibility to the latency, right, in case of a car-to-car communication or large infrastructure communication. Second one being smart city. We put this one on this slide because of the amount of data, the amount of connections that we need to be connected at the same time. If you take the city, every street light, every door, every light, everything would need to be connected, and all of that generates a huge amount of in the billions of connections that we need to orchestrate, and so you need a network that can connect all these devices in a secure way and in an immediate way. The other one I wanted to mention is health. The e-health part, I think, touches on the reliability of the network. As a telecom operator, but everybody around the value chain of 5G, we carry a responsibility, in particular when we touch people's lives. And this is important for us, that we can't afford anymore to have any kind of outage or any kind of issue across, because people will rely more and more on connectivity, on fair things being connected, and the data that those things would send out. And we can't afford to have any issue there, including the security piece that Scott mentioned that is also very important for us. Last but not least, two more, sorry. One is the drones. Drone touches the thing I just mentioned in the slide before around the control of the network. We have several tests going on, in particular in the UK and in Germany, where we can, through the network, control drones that fly in no-fly zone areas and use the network to send messages to the drone as an alert. And then if still the drone doesn't respond to the let's say alert message, we can use, we have a protocol to land the drone safely and avoid drone flying on airports or hospitals and that kind of no-fly zone. Last one, I think Scott did a great work in explaining that, is the connected factories, so the Industry 4.0. I think this is very important for us. One, I think Scott mentioned the longevity, so it's applying 5G, is the evolution of 4G. We consider part of the 5G network all of our narrowband IoT deployments, so all of that would be orchestrated by the 5G network, and so existing assets would be able to lead with new assets, and for a factory, that is key. And also the other component of the Industry 4.0 is the immediate, the zero latency interaction between machines within the same factory, and I would add the in-factory, out-of-factory connectivity that is also critical for the Industry 4.0 industry. Other is something I keep on every slide, like on this one that is probably my last slide. Not probably, it is my last slide. It is basically things we don't know. When we started deploying the 4G network more than 10 years ago, we weren't aware of the massive deployment, the massive use that the people would have done of our 4G network. If you think of social networks, videos, we didn't know about Instagram being booming so much and so on. So all of that is, I think there is that big component of 5G too. We, as I said in the beginning, should be very proud of doing this investment. Everybody along the value chain, not only telecom operator, of putting this great technology and available for everybody out there to develop the future of what's needed and leverage these skills and these features that this technology has to develop what is the future of humanity. So that's the other part that I'm very excited about, and I think we're going to discover more day by day. Going back on the automotive space, I think automotive usually, as many of you already know, define the specific of design the car 5 to 6 years in advance. So car manufacturers are forcing us to work on a longer-term vision, and we are working very closely to them to create the cars of the future that are, of course, more and more autonomous, more and more green, more and more shared. And to do that, there's a need of a broader connectivity, and that includes 5G. So we're working with them to start testing how would a 5G car work, and that's the driver today for us to keep on innovating and discovering new things and working hard on it. And then the other one is the drone. That is a new industry that needs this control factor that the new network will offer. And so instead of going after deploying the whole drone estate, expected to be massive in the coming years on 4G, having that 4G to 5G already embedded in the drone design is something that is also pushing us to keep on innovating and being close to the 5G needs. So this is basically what I wanted to share. We are very excited about it, and I think we should be all very proud, and I'm happy to get questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ludo. Really nice talk about use cases and something that's obviously being looked at very closely. With that, we will begin the Q&A portion of our webinar this morning. And I'd like to start with a sort of general question just to get everyone talking about it. But we do hear a lot the word ecosystem, and especially when it comes to 5G. What does this mean, and how are your companies developing an ecosystem? And I will start with you on that, Ludo. How is Vodafone building out an ecosystem?
Yes, so this is a very good question. So first of all, we are not building an ecosystem ourselves. I think the ecosystem is, again, the industry needs to build it up. So for 5G to be a success, yes, there is the network component, and we are, I think, putting a lot of effort in it, and we are probably one of the front runners on the network side, but it needs to come along with, like I said before, from the module, the hardware design, the system integration support, up to the artificial intelligence and analytics around it, and then the outcome base, and all of this needs to coexist. So what we're doing here, we are opening several 5G labs in most of our countries, but also beyond our country, and the reason we think are critical. Like we are planning to open a 5G lab in the U.S. and in California too, because it's key for us to be there to help our customers to innovate. We are pushing, or let's say helping our partners from the module to the antenna manufacturer to the hardware manufacturer to move in the 5G direction. There's not much push needed. Everybody's doing it regardless of us. And most importantly, I think, is that we are carefully listening to our customers and their needs and trying to define what are the actual needs of our customers and identify the right partners to get to what our customers need to deploy in the 5G space. Second to last is the regulator. We are working close in every company with the regulators to make sure that we have the right regulation in place for 5G to be a success. And then last, I think we are also, as a telecom operator in the industry, we are leveraging a lot of partnerships. So I know before we spoke about roaming, too, it is a challenge. I think telecom operator will come together to find a way forward together with the GSMA to have roaming for 5G. And we will all work together. We're partnering with other telecom operators, with cloud providers, with system integrators, and all of those other key players of this ecosystem, let's call it.
Thanks so much. Hey, very interesting stuff. I'd like to pass that question certainly off to Scott and Rafael. Scott, start with you. A lot of talk about partnership, which we all know is key in this space. What's Digi up to?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. I mean, and particularly with the way we integrate a lot. So we have partnerships, in place and developing. The big one, one of the big ones you'll see, particularly looking forward to 5G, is the combination of carriers and cloud working together, and we see that continuing, to be important. But when you start to move into the application space and the hardware space where we work, sensors, we talk to a lot of sensor companies, both companies that are trying to just sell sensors and figuring out how do I make these sensors more valuable, or we're talking to an application developer and they need help finding sensors. Application software and particularly middleware, we are particularly always on the lookout for what we call middleware, which would be analytics capabilities or basically software that can work across multiple applications. It might be machine learning foundational software. It might be certain types of analytics software. But middleware is an important one, and we have a number of parties that do kind of middleware stack integration or middleware data analytics. We have to look all the way down to the silicon and the modules. We're putting modules into the into our products. So we got to watch what the Qualcomms of the world are doing, and we got to watch what the U-Blocks, Pellets, and Sierras and Quectels of the world are doing. We have to make sure we understand those partnerships and then the partnerships they have with the carriers. And then I think the last thing, Harold and I were talking about antennas. Antennas are becoming more and more important, particularly when you build things that want to be small, and the complexity of the antenna structures and things. These are all, some of these are hardware ecosystem, but we have a big combination of hardware and software. Millimeter wave is something we got to worry about now, and so it's a lot of fun. The ecosystem is rich, but it's also diverse. So it's hard to navigate. Sometimes that's what our customers like us to do, is just help them navigate it.
Right. Rafael, certainly want to give you a bite of this apple. Partnerships and ecosystem development. What's happening at BICS?
So BICS, due to our unique position of being a carrier, and we're there to do the interconnection, our role is basically to connect the ecosystems with each other, and especially handling the interworking. So there is a lot of local ecosystems, new systems, a lot of vendors, a lot of networks with different parameters, not always talking supposedly in the same way. And BIC's role is more in making this happening, especially on the roaming side and the interworking side. So our link is working with the different operators, carriers, with their vendors, with the vendors of the devices, and allowing all this to happen in a seamless way. So we are more like on the transport layer, and sometimes enabling specific services to manage the traffic or to change it in order to make it work in a better way.
Right. Very good. Thanks so much. Got a question, an audience question here, and I think I might start with Scott on this one. Would you agree the complexity of the new networks encourage the movement of security to the data object itself rather than dependent on the network?
Yeah, Harold and I saw that when we talked about it. Security is always done in layers. We have a thing we call trust fence, which is a framework of best practices. So, I think, when I saw that question, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking, well, there's complexities, challenges security at times. But I'm going to, would I move the security completely out of the network? I think I'm going to have security in layers in the network, and I'm going to manage it. I'm going to have security obligations on the devices. I think the approach will probably be the same. The final implementation, may be different, and I may lean more heavily on certain parts of the infrastructure that give me new capabilities. But I guess fundamentally, I think security will be, as a framework or as a method. Security is not something you buy; it's something you do. And I think the things that you do will be very similar, but the outcomes may have some changes.
Right. We've got two network providers. Rafael, Ludo, any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I agree with Scott. Security is a methodology, is a concept, and it's a service, and it's something that you put in place. And you will need at different layers. So, of course, if the device is protected, but you have to look at also at the SIM card, you have to look at the traffic itself, you look at the IP layer, but also at the 5G layer itself. So it's a combination and methodology that you will have apply, and where best practice will also come in line. There is a lot of talk about how we are going to encrypt the traffic between two operators or within a network. So all these elements have to be taken into account. And it's not just to decide I'm putting security there. It's managing that security, updating, getting the best practice of the world, and finding the right balance between also not blocking the service because of too high security concept, which is always the big fight between IT and telecom world, where you have to find the right balance of allowing telecom, which is the most open part, and IT, which is the most closest part. So this is a bit how we look at it. So we're looking at different layers in the way Scott was mentioning.
Right. Ludo, anything to add?
I don't think there's much to add, to be honest. I think they said everything. I think the only thing I would add is the partnering side, also on the security side. I think we would have to define ways of working together in making sure the end-to-end solution is secure. Because often we take care of the security of our portion of the value chain, but instead we tend to, the risk is where we pass it on to the cloud people or we take it on from the hardware side. That's where I think there is a risk. So I think that working together to offer an end-to-end security all across the solution will be key. Right.
Oh, great stuff. Certainly security top of mind for a lot of folks interested. Next question is kind of a loaded one, and with apologies, I think I'll hand this off to Rafael first. Rafael, how much is it going to cost for 5G in IoT? Can you give us any thoughts on price per month per device, per IoT device? Is that possible? Rafael, you with us?
Sorry, I was on this. No, it's a very good question. It's not an easy one, but in general, the concept here today is to more going to a price per device with a certain bandwidth allocated or usage-based, and eventually a price if they go above. If you speak strictly about IoT, especially the problem today with IoT is the fact that they don't generate much more traffic in many of the cases like smart cities and so on, compared to the new cases where there will be a lot of bandwidth, where there might be a different way of invoicing. So if I would compare it with today, I would keep it at a price per IMC or per device, monthly or yearly, with a certain cap. Then after that, it will depend how the market will take and the availability and the competition that will be happening between different providers.
Right. Thank you. And that was a tough one. Scott, Ludo, any thoughts on IoT pricing?
I'll step in. So I'll obviously let the carriers talk about the data plans and things, but we look ahead to the things we have to build, the physical aspects of it. And right now, because of some of the technologies, we can see 2, 3, maybe even 5x the cost in some of the physical things we have to implement the antennas, the compute, the memory, power systems. So there will be some additional expense, particularly if you're using the high bandwidth and the high speed parts of 5G. I think the regular, the IoT things that we're doing now and the low cats probably stay in roughly the same, but there will be an impact on the physical costs of what you implement in the devices, we believe.
Great stuff, Ludo. Thoughts on pricing from a carrier perspective?
So I think we are looking at it, of course, very very closely. It's something we have to crack, of course, how the commercial work around it. We're looking at something that I think is the most interesting approach, the outcome-based pricing. I think that is the one that attracts us the most today. So instead of going through how many gigs or megabytes you used, it's actually what is the outcome you're looking for, and was the connectivity reliable all across the journey? You didn't need to deliver a partial from China to the US. All across the route, you had the right connectivity you needed, with the right bandwidth, the right latency, and so on, and you deliver the package on time. So then we charge for a different price than instead if things didn't go well. So it's more of a outcome-based pricing and quality-based pricing more than quantity-based pricing as it was in the past, or it is currently now. That's what I see more interesting. I think we'll have a whole spectrum of different commercial approach in any case. Going from maybe by device, by use case, by application, quality, speed, and so on. I think we'll have some interesting new ideas coming up, maybe even a fixed price. Like if you think of a meter, maybe one day you just buy a meter, it sends one reading a day for 10 years, and that's included maybe in the hardware cost up front. We paid for it, it has it already included, and it just triggers one message a day for 10 years, and that's already prepaid or whatever it is going to be the payment term. But I'd say, it's just a one-off, and that includes it all.
Right. No, there's certainly some new pricing models out there, and I think we'll see further evolution. But thanks for that. Got some great questions here about business models, and I think I'll start with you, Ludo. What are generally the parameters you take into account to analyze the business case for an enterprise IoT application, and taking that a step further? Maybe you could talk about that in the context of a small business. How can small businesses leverage IoT solutions? Ludo?
Yeah, so I think there's two questions you asked. So one is how can small business leverage on IoT, and the other one is how do we evaluate the business case? I think the two questions kind of go into the same direction. What we tend to do is that we really try to help the customer by asking the right questions after 10 years of experience in IoT, asking them, okay, what are you trying to achieve? Because that's at the end what we're trying to do here. And then trying to help the customer to make the right decisions on what kind of connectivity solution do you need, which campus are you going to approach, what kind of regulation you're going to face, and how many data, what kind of latency you need, and then try to tailor the best solution, the best connectivity solution for the customer, for that specific use case for the customer. Yes, the size of the company counts, but I think we tend to look at the use case first. Then if it's for a startup or for a big car manufacturer, we tend to have kind of the same approach where we go in and try to find the best solution for the customer itself. Of course, then big volumes drive, probably lower pricing, and big pockets can invest more into innovation and stuff like that. But having said that, we tend to take it at heart by starting by the use case, countries, regulation, exact needs you have, and then defining the right solution together with the customer.
Right, great stuff. Rafael, thoughts on enterprise use cases?
Today, realistically, the enterprise use case is more about type of volumes and amount of devices that they can produce, which makes a business case. In the future, I think business case will be based on different parameters, like Ludo was mentioning, like quality, like the type of service. But today, IoT is focusing mainly on 4G and bit of 5G. Is still very, I would say, down-to-earth consumption and mass market. So it's very the use case. If I would go enterprise today, is more about what are the volumes that they can generate to get a price, and what are the amount of devices. But the market will change, but it's a bit difficult to know how and in what way and when it will change. Because at the end, carriers, that Vodafone made a good case of that, you still have to come back and make an ROI on it, and it's not an easy way to come with very low consumers and low amount of devices. So for me, this is how it is happening today. The future might change it completely.
Right. And Scott, certainly want to hear Digi's perspective on this. I think you guys are sort of in the trenches, so to speak. So
yeah, that's true. When we're looking at the first part of the question, the enterprise, what makes a good enterprise IoT application, I think is the way it would state. Really, three things. The first one is, as everyone has said, the use case or whatever. The way we would say it is, what problem is being solved? It has to be a hard problem. It has to be a valuable problem. So you start with what problem is being solved. Then we look very quickly. We look at integration of the technology into workflow. Almost all IoT applications have mobile in them today, and so you've got a combination of workflow and usability. One of the challenges enterprises have is that the customer is sometimes not the user, and you have to always stay focused on the user as well as the actual enterprise customer. If you implement something that an industry buys and they give it to a field operator, if the product doesn't work well with that field operator, if it doesn't work in their workflow, they'll put it down. And as soon as they put it down, then the customer isn't getting the value anymore. And then the last thing, and this is one that we've seen stop applications, it's a combination of go-to-market and deployment. You have to be able to deploy at low cost. If you got to roll trucks to deploy, you can have, if you're going to deploy 10,000 things, you got a $2.5 to $3 million cost in front of you. And if you're going through a channel, you'll have intermittent parties that may or may not understand what you're trying to do. So the combination of go-to-market and deployment are critical. And then if I quickly jump to the small business, I think IoT is really exciting for small business. If you're a buyer, if you're a small business that needs IoT help, I think there are people out there, and the people that know what they're doing are focusing on DIY installation, and they're focusing on online go-to-markets, so you can go to places that, clearing places that you can buy things and deploy them. If you're a small business user that you want to build IoT solutions, then I think the technology is very accessible. There's people, companies like Digi, we have a design services and solutioning team that helps people build what they need to build and integrate what they need to integrate. So I think it's a very rich environment. But you go back to the enterprise problem. If you're not solving a hard problem, you're not going to have the money to sustain the effort, and really is what it boils down to.
Right. Great stuff. Hey, we are now at 4 minutes past the hour, so a little bit overtime. But thanks so much to, first of all, Rafael Glatt of Bix, Scott Nelson of Digi, and Ludo Fossati of Vodafone for providing us with some real insight as to what's going on with 5G in the IoT sector. Thanks so much to all the speakers, and thanks certainly to everyone in the audience. We did get a few questions that we didn't get to, but those will be answered offline. And with that, I would ask the speakers to just stay on the line for a minute or two afterwards. But thanks to the audience, and we will be doing this again soon. So thanks so much, everyone, for your time. And with that, we're going to sign off for today.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.